The destruction of the culture continues while conservatives struggle to fight back, and we look back at 9/11. My name is Sean Clinton, and this is the Guy on a Freedom Show. Alrighty, so I hope everyone is having themselves a great week. Happy Saturday. So I'm going to get to the whole, the destruction of the culture and how that's been continuing all along. And then also the 9/11 anniversary and all that. But first, we're going to give our COVID-19 update. So in terms of kind of really just cases and, deaths and all that, it continues to go down, like on average in the United States. I can see I'm going to put the chart back up here. It's the same thing that's been going on for the past couple weeks. The curve continues to go down. The number of daily cases continues to drop and everything. The death rate continues to drop dramatically. So that's all good news in terms of where we stand here in the United States. And as far as individual states, like Georgia, Florida, and all those states that had spikes early in the summer, those are all pretty good. Like Georgia we're pretty low. Florida the same way, and Arizona the same way, and a bunch of other states as well. California the same way. So when we look at these numbers, it really just doesn't make sense why, for example, California and New York, especially New York, where they're getting hardly anything a day. As far as cases, they're getting like 0 deaths a day from COVID. So it just doesn't make sense why they continue to shut down. And the media wants to try to out that's the best COVID response right there, to shut down the country. That saves lives right there. And there's no evidence whatsoever that the lockdowns saved lives. None. All it did is really, I guess it stopped from the hospital being overwhelmed, but really those weren't even being closer from being overwhelmed at all. And really, all it did is just delay kind of the inevitable, honestly. So, seriously, if we look at places like, here in the United States, or not really in the individual states like New York, or just really places that really locked down my heart, like Italy and all that, you can see kind of the curve did kind of flatten in terms, but again, after they opened up, the cases went up. But when you go to Sweden, they got hit hard the first time around because they didn't shut down, and right now they're doing perfectly okay. And that's what's kind of a weird contention right there, because New York kind of did the same thing at the beginning. They didn't really shut down, but then eventually they pretty much forced us to shut down. And honestly, if Gavin Newsom, not Gavin Newsom, but Cuomo, if he decided, okay, I'm going to protect the nursing homes and all that, kind of keep them protected, but everyone else, keep precautions, but, go about the daily business, that would be a pretty good COVID response. That's pretty much what, Florida and other places did, most other states. But the problem with why New York got hit so hard the first time around, and why there's so many deaths, is really because a large portion of the deaths in New York are from nursing homes, because Cuomo decided stupidly to ship COVID patients into nursing homes. That was the biggest mistake that he could possibly make. And if he didn't do that, I think New York would be in pretty good shape for the most part. Excuse me. But again, the media wants to try out his response and all that as for lockdowns and everything. They want to try that as a response that should have been done nationwide. And that's what Trump should have done, that he failed in his response to COVID. But the thing is, Trump understood is that we're a federalist nation. I can't just overrule the power of the states by a nationwide shutdown, because we cannot treat every state as equal. Every state is very different how COVID was hit them. So South Dakota, for example, they didn't shut down, and they're pretty much doing okay. They're doing pretty good. And places like Montana and all that, they hardly have anybody there. So there was no really reason to shut down Montana, especially the more states that are not as popular. There's no reason whatsoever for a statewide shutdown. So when you look at that, there's no reason why we should have had a nationwide shutdown, and we didn't. So that's what was good on President Trump's part, is that he didn't really shut down the entire country. He recommended social distancing or whatever, but he didn't like formally shut down the entire country. That was all in the states that did that, not on him. But this whole thing leads us to something that President Trump, a little controversy that President Trump finds himself in right now, in terms of his response and everything. So overall, like I've been saying, his response were pretty good, as far as like his actual policy response. Rhetoric at the beginning, not really so much, but he did get better in terms of his rhetoric. But of course, he always says stuff that will eventually get him in trouble in some sort of way. So there's this guy named Bob Woodward, who is the kind of a journalist. And then back in February 7th, he talked to President Trump. And kind of did a little interview with him and talking about kind of what, situation with COVID and everything. And first off, these little, like, sessions where he talks to these random journalists or whatever, it kind of needs to stop, because all he does is get himself into more trouble in each little interview. Every single interview he does, he gets himself into more trouble. Always. So, one of the controversies he's found himself in is what he said about COVID back on February 7th. And keep in mind, back on February 7th, not much was known about COVID. Nobody was really worried about it at all. And so, again, I need to put that into that context before I read what he actually said. So here's what he said in terms of COVID and during that time. It goes to the air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And now that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than it's also more deadly than even your strenuous flus. People don't realize we lose 25,000 to 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right? So, as you see there, he's talking about, the virus being airborne and how deadly it is and everything. It kind of stuff we know now, but we didn't know then. And so the whole contention right here that he was hiding the information from the American people or whatever. But at the same time, if Bob, Woodward knew this right here at the time, he would have released it. And the reason why he didn't really release it is because he didn't believe it. He didn't believe what Trump was saying. And there's no chance whatsoever that majority of people would have believed what Trump was saying about the virus during that time. Not one thing he said about it. Then now we jump to kind of mid-March, March 19th, where he talked to Bob Woodward again. And this is when, people, of course, were aware of the virus, and this is where kind of the lockdowns began here in the United States. And then kind of Bob was kind of bringing up of why kind of he was seemingly kind of playing it down, the threat of it. And the reason why he was playing it down is because he didn't want to panic. But now that's being twisted by the media and something that's saying, okay, see, he was just lying to people. He was lying to people on purpose. He wanted people to die or something stupid like that. No, he didn't want people to panic. And that's perfectly good, I guess, maybe the way he said it was bad, but honestly, he didn't want to incite panic, and that's a good thing. So again, there's no reason to panic in the first place from this virus, none whatsoever. As we know now, especially for the vast majority of people who get it, would be perfectly fine. So again, there was no reason to panic in the first place, and that's what he was trying to do. Did not incite panic, while the media was trying to incite as much panic as possible during that time. Excuse me. So now the idea is that Trump lied and people died, the whole thing, and that Democrats would have done a completely different response to this, and all that. And keep in mind, during the time, the Democrats were getting the same exact information that Trump was getting, and then Mr. Pelosi has the audacity to say Trump failed in his COVID response. I would have done something different. But at the same time, when COVID was getting into the United States, she was encouraging people to go into, Chinatown in New York City, hang out with people and everything. So, again, everybody kind of got this wrong at the beginning. Everybody. So, to try to pin that all on one guy for the reason why it spread here in the United States is completely foolish. And I don't think it even got here in January. I think it's been here since probably October or November when it first started spreading in China. In China, again, they kept it quiet for about 2 months. And that allowed people coming in and out of the country, especially the region where it first spread. So that's what caused people bring it here to the United States. So I think it was actually more widespread than we know now than what's reported, which is actually a good thing because that means we are pretty much either at or pretty close to herd immunity. So again, should Trump be saying this stuff? Is it politically smart? No. But would it hurt him in the end? Nah, it won't. And again, his COVID response overall was pretty good. So it was pretty good. So, and the Democrats saying that they'll do something different. Come on, they would have done the exact same thing. And Joe Biden, he said I would have done something different. He would have done the exact same thing as Trump in a situation. Alrighty, so now let's move on to the culture and what's been going on with that. So really, the destruction of the culture continues apace. It's becoming a madhouse in terms of what's in the culture and just how it just, I don't know, it's becoming a mess, a very bad mess, and things that are obviously very evil and just horrible overall has now been propped up as something to be celebrated, to be encouraged, or to be kind of left alone or whatever. So the first one is obviously abortion. Abortion now is considered a sacrament in today's society. It is a blessing. It is cool. It is wonderful. It is freedom. So the backdrop of this is due to a movie released by HBO, that's being released by HBO Max. It's called Unpregnant. So what this movie's about is basically this girl gets pregnant and she tries to get an abortion, but in wherever she lives, she can't. So she travels to New Mexico to get an abortion. And apparently the movie is all, I haven't seen it myself, but from the synopsis and the reviews from it, is all kind of more of a comedy type thing. Makes it kind of makes abortion look fun and cool and hip and all that. Which is pretty darn disgusting because abortion is actually pretty gruesome and murder. It is straight out murder. So starting off with, I'm going to show you a clip of what a second trimester abortion. And those who say an abortion is cool, it's nothing. It's just it's just a surgery. It's no big deal. Show them this video and see if they'll say the exact same thing. So here's that video right here.
abortionectomy is performed between 13 and 24 weeks of pregnancy. After administering anesthesia, the abortionist uses a weighted speculum, like this one, that opens the vagina widely. Because second trimester babies are so large, this greater access facilitates a late-term abortion. Late-term abortion requires that the cervix be prepared 24 to 48 hours in advance with laminaria. Laminaria is a type of sterilized seaweed that absorbs water over 8 to 12 hours and swells to several times its original diameter. Once removed, metal dilators can be used to further open the cervix as needed. Once the cervix has been stretched open, the suction tube is placed inside. A baby at 20 weeks gestation is as big as the length of my hand, from head to rump, not counting the legs. The suction machine is turned on, and pale yellow amniotic fluid surrounding the baby is suctioned out through the catheters. With babies this big, they don't fit through catheters this size. The baby's bones and skull are too strong to be torn apart by suction alone. This is a Sofer clamp. A Sofer clamp is made of stainless steel. It's about 13 inches long. The business end is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide, and there are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. The abortionist uses this clamp to grasp an arm or leg. Once he has a firm grip, the abortionist pulls hard in order to tear the limb from the baby's body. One by one, the rest of the limbs are removed, along with the intestines, the spine, and the heart and lungs. Usually the most difficult part of the procedure is extracting the baby's head, which is about the size of a large plum at 20 weeks. The head is grasped and crushed. The abortionist knows he has crushed the skull when a white substance comes out of the cervix. This was the baby's brains. The abortionist then removes skull pieces. He removes the placenta and any leftover parts of the baby with a curette, scraping the lining of the uterus for any remaining tissue. The abortionist then collects the baby parts and reassembles them to make sure that there are 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Once all the parts have been accounted for, the abortion is complete. For the woman, this procedure carries a significant risk of major complications, including perforation or laceration of the uterus or cervix, with possible damage to the bowel, bladder, and other maternal organs. Infection and hemorrhage can also occur, which can even lead to death. Future pregnancies are also at greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Dr. Anthony Levatino, and in the early part of my career as an OBGYN, I performed over 1,200 abortions.
So obviously, right there, that's pretty horrific stuff right there. And we see people, kind of show abortion as something cool and hip or whatever. It's so gross. It's very gross stuff. So it's so sickening that HBO would actually release something like this, knowing probably full well what abortion consists of. In response to this, there's been a large outcry against him, and rightfully so. There's been an entire email campaign against him, and how they need to take down, don't stop the release of this movie and everything. And that's all being led by a group I found them on Instagram. It's called Team Pro-Lifers, and they have an entire website on this. It's a really cool group. Actually, go check it out on Instagram. If you have Instagram, check them out. We're there. So I'm going to get to more on this and also more other stuff in the culture and everything. But first, you got to go over to YouTube or the Guide to Freedom blog to check it out. So not only you get the rest of this, also my kind of thoughts on 9/11 anniversary, but also kind of towards the end when I go over the Book of John, and also, the good stuff and the bad stuff of the week. And remember, you can find me on your favorite podcast listening sites like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. This is the Guide to Freedom Show. Alright, so let's continue on right here. So again, like I said, there's a large email campaign, a call campaign against HBO for this, for trying to release this movie, and I actually myself did join in too. So here's kind of what I said to them, and it's kind of really just an example of what exactly what other people said about it. Hello, you guys. Hello. You guys have probably received hundreds to thousands of emails already on this topic, and many more will arrive. I'll admit, I haven't watched the movie myself, but I have read the synopsis, and reviews on it. The disgusting doesn't even begin to describe this film and what it is about. Abortion is a gruesome act of murder against an unborn child. However, with this movie, you guys decided to portray it as something fun and cool. It portrays a comedic side of abortion that doesn't exist. It is far from fun and far from cool. What you are teaching teens with this film is that abortion is perfectly righteous and should be celebrated. Let's make this perfectly clear. Abortion is murder. That is a clear fact. God created us in His image, and we are all unconditionally loved and valued by Him. This includes the unborn. By releasing this movie, you guys are knowingly participating in the genocide of unborn babies. So until you guys decide to pull this movie down, I will not watch anything from HBO and will encourage others to do the same. I hope and pray that you guys make the right decision. Sincerely, Sean Clinton. And of course, many others kind of said it close to the same thing. So they got rightfully hit by this. And of course, have they stopped the release of it? No, they're still probably going to release it. They're going to ignore this outcry, of course, because again, from their point of view, abortion is nothing. Abortion is just a surgery. And it's just so sickening how abortion has become almost a sacrament to many people in the U.S. So there was this billboard that someone put up. I forget where it was, but here's what it said. Abortion is a blessing. My decision to have an abortion was guided by my faith and my love for my family. Really? Abortion is a blessing? In what way? In what way is the gruesome act of murder against an unborn child? In what way is that a blessing? This is all part of the whole me culture. And she hides around behind the fact that, it was guided by my faith. Faith in what? Certainly not God and Jesus. Certainly not God or anything. Because, really, if you're a follower of Christ, there's no possible way that you can support abortion. There's no way. Because, the Bible is very clear. I mean, it doesn't say anything about abortion specifically, but it doesn't have to. Because it clearly says, for one, that we are created in God's image. And there are a bevy of verses kind of explaining how God, this is in the Psalms, how God formed us in our mother's womb and was already decided who we were going to be before we were even conceived. So the idea that an unborn child is just a clump of cells is completely nonsense, completely and utter nonsense. But again, this is just only just a snippet of what the culture is going through right now. It's pretty bad stuff. And one of them is, of course, pedophilia. Pedophilia is now being to the point where it's considered normal at this point. So, California recently passed a bill. It was signed into law by Gavin Newsom. And in the bill is Senate Bill 145. And what is basically this, according to the Los Angeles Times, this measure will amend existing state law that allows judges to decide whether an adult convicted of having vaginal sexual intercourse with a minor should register as a sex offender in cases in which the minor is 14 years old or older, and the adult is not more than 10 years older than the minor. So basically, if an adult has sex or actually rapes a minor, like a 14-year-old or even younger, a judge can decide, just a judge can decide whether or not to register this person as a sex offender, which makes no sense. Really, legally, I mean, a child can't consent to that. So it's a rape, really, no matter what, legally. And morally, too. So it just. So we're just at a point where we're gonna give a pass to pedophiles. We're gonna give them the pass and let them do their acts over and over and over again without really any major consequences. It's very disgusting stuff. And you can see it being normalized all throughout the culture, which leads us to Netflix. So Netflix recently released a movie. It's called Cuties. And what Cuties is basically about, I'm not going to show a picture or anything of it at all because it's grotesque stuff right there. So basically what this movie is about these 11-year-old girls who are in these almost provocative outfits and doing twerking and all other disgusting stuff. And Netflix actually released that movie. How can you possibly think that's okay to release or even make in the first place? That's gross stuff. So in response to that, there was an outcry against them, and rightfully so. Many people canceled their Netflix subscription, including me. Because I'm not going to support a company that promotes pedophilia like that. None whatsoever. And what's disgusting is that people are actually trying to defend this. Saying that, oh, it's no big deal. It's actually a great movie. It's a coming-of-age movie. Really? Is it really? So here's this headline from the New Yorker. Cuties, the extraordinary Netflix debut that became the target of a right-wing campaign. So again, we have the whole Republicans pounce, Republicans seize, Republicans whatever. The same sort of thing they do with every little thing the Democrats or the left does bad. So yeah, that's a pretty unbelievable headline. And just see people constantly trying to defend this is it's very gross. So Lauren Chen, who she works with the Blaze over Blaze TV, she has her own show and everything. So here's what she had to say about Cuties and everything. The film Cuties is disgusting, but what's even more disappointing are there were people who are defending it. Well, actually, I thought the movie was entertaining, so I'm going to give them pass for sexually exploited 11-year-olds. You're enabling pedophilia, period. And she's exactly right about that. She is exactly right about what that movie does. So in response, a random dude, responded to her and said, "No, you're wrong, and you're probably a pervert who fantasizes about underage children. The film is criticizing pedophilia and specialization of young girls. If you watched the film, you would know that, but you're probably a pedophile, so maybe not." And here's what she said in response. Apparently I'm a pedophile for squints. Believing that twerking and scantily clad 11-year-olds have no place in our entertainment. That's a nice gaslighting you got there. Good for her right there. Seriously? You're criticizing a film, but it's not criticizing a film for basically being for promoting pedophilia, but if you criticize it, you're the actual pedophile. That's weird. That does not make sense whatsoever. And so when you look at this, when you just see the culture just being completely just destroyed all over. You gotta wonder, like, how in the world can we fix this? And I mean, I would like to say there's an easy answer, but there really isn't. So there are a number of ways, for example, conservatives can, you know, kind of fight to respond to this and fight back. And the way to do that is more kind of get, I guess, engage in the culture more and try to like really point out stuff that are wrong, that they know that are wrong. And this is where really Christians need to do the same thing, followers of Christ. Because really, over the years, one of the main reasons why really the culture has, kind of fallen the way it is because it just, or I want to say this is all remote. This is not fully on Christians, on the church, but a small snippet of it is because the church decided that the culture was no longer necessary to pursue and to reach out to. So basically, the church cowered away and left the culture up to do its own thing, and that's how it just completely became an entire mess from there. So for followers of Christ, really the best way we can engage the culture. When I say engage the culture, I don't mean be part of it, but engage it and reach out to them with the gospel, with Christ, and just spread the gospel to the culture. And really point out things that we know that are wrong. For example, abortion and pedophilia, things like that. Point that out. We need to have the courage to point that out and say, no, that is wrong. I'm not going to make excuses for it. That is wrong. And pedophilia is wrong overall. And it's so weird is that you're basically called a fearmonger if you're saying that pedophilia is becoming normalized. But at the same time, it is. And this is what people feared, what Christians feared when the whole same-sex marriage thing was passed in the Supreme Court. Because it was only a slippery slope. And that's exactly what's happened. So that's why we need to have the courage to point out what is wrong. Gay marriage is wrong. It is. Abortion is wrong. Pedophilia is wrong. There's many things wrong. Does that mean we're looking at ourselves as perfect? No, we're not perfect ourselves. We're sinners just like everyone else. But at the same time, we do still have the courage to point out that and really bring the gospel to this culture, because that's really the only ways we can actually take back the culture. Because this is why, again, I do this podcast, why I do my blog, because I don't want to just sit by while the culture just dissipates in front of us. While I can do something, we can do something. So really, think about that. Whatever your talents are, if you want to get into podcasting, especially if you follow Christ, do it. Get the message out, get the gospel out through podcasting. Or if you want to become a preacher or like a pastor, pursue that. Or whatever is your work, use that as an opportunity to spread the gospel in any way. Alrighty, so now let's move on to 9/11. So obviously yesterday was Friday, in case I released this on Sunday. So anyways, on Friday was the 19th anniversary of 9/11. And so many people will know what 9/11 is, of course, and the horrific stuff that took place then. And what's very interesting is that, this year, a lot of the people, like more the first time voters in this year, are the first ones to not really be alive for 9/11, to be voting, which is very interesting. So, kind of go over the details of what exactly happened that day. So, early on September 11th, there was 19 people, 19 guys, terrorists, who boarded planes all across, uh, kind of across the East Coast right there. Of course, we have Flight 11, Flight 175, Flight 77, and Flight 93, and all of them took off early that morning. And of course, they were hijacked. 11 was hijacked and eventually crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Flight 175 was hijacked and it crashed into the South Tower. And the Flight 77 was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon as well. All happening within like minutes of each other. And then Flight 93 was what makes that so interesting is that Flight 93 was being the last plane being hijacked and everything. And they were heading to Washington D.C. to crash into the Capitol building or the White House. So, of course, the passengers on board got word of what was going on and decided to, okay, we're not going to let this happen. So we're going to fight back. We're going to try to take back this plane. And in doing so, the plane crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And so, yeah, over 3,000 people lost their lives that day. It was just a horrific day. Horrific day. And kind of for me, my personal 9/11 story in a way is like, I don't actually, because I was only 3 years old at the time, so I don't actually recall it fully, and definitely I definitely would not have understood what was going on then, because I was only 3 years old. So, but really, I can only imagine what exactly people were going through and thinking during this time when they experienced it in real time. I can only really imagine that, but it's a really horrific attack on our country, and really what kind of triggered our response to go into the Middle East and hunt down these terrorists. But also, it was a time where kind of Americans united, especially in like the next day. People were buying flags, like American flags were being sold out. People were, hugging each other. Just police strangers were hugging each other, no matter what their background was. It was really, in the face of a horrible tragedy, it was really cool to see that Americans actually united during that time. But when you go to today, now it's completely different. Which leads us to this trending hashtag that happened on September 11th. All Buildings Matter was trending number 1 on Twitter. I'm not kidding. It was literally trending number 1 on Twitter. All Buildings Matter. This is the course of play on the whole All Lives Matter thing. Which is, of course, All Lives Matter is a rebuke to Black Lives Matter, which is an organization that's a Marxist organization that really doesn't care about black people whatsoever. It does not. So now some geniuses on Twitter decided, let's trend All Buildings Matter on September 11th. Are you freaking kidding me? Like, how pathetic of a person do you have to be to actually try to tweet this out and try to get it trending on Twitter? And the fact that it was trending on Twitter above any sort of thing that commemorates 9/11, it's disgusting in itself. It just tells you just how far we have fallen as a country and how just bad social media is. It's really, really disgusting stuff right there. And that's just really part of the reason why we cannot forget. We cannot forget what happened, because we not only forget what happened during the day, but also what happened afterwards, where Americans united. We need to get back to that point. And I hope it doesn't take another tragedy like that to do so. But I fear if it happen like that again, there won't be the same union as there was before. It just simply won't. But I don't know, so yeah. 9/11 is always those days where kind of people pause and just ponder where they were on that day and everything. So very, very interesting stuff right there. Alrighty, so now let's move on to scripture now. So we're going to be continuing in John chapter 18. We're actually finishing up today. And remember, you can follow me along if you want, and I'll be in the New Living Translation. I'm starting from verse 28. Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. Then he was taken to the headquarters of the Roman governor. His accusers didn't go inside because it would defile them, and they wouldn't be allowed to celebrate Passover. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man?" And they said, "We wouldn't have handed him over to you if you weren't a criminal," they retorted. "Then take him away and judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. "Only the Romans are permitted to execute someone," the Jewish leaders replied. This fulfilled Jesus' prediction about the way he would die. Then Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for a trial. Why? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." And then Pilate said, "So you're a king?" Jesus responded, "You say that I am. You say I'm a king, but actually I was born and came to the world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. Then he went out again to the people and told them, "He is not guilty of any crime, but you have a custom of asking me to release one prisoner each year at Passover. Would you like me to release this king of the Jews?" But they shouted back, "No, not this man. We want Barabbas." So this is kind of very interesting in kind of two ways right here. First off, when they first bring Jesus to Pilate right there, when he says, "What is your crime?" Then they say, "We wouldn't have brought him to you if it were a crime or anything." This is very similar to how things even roll today. Very, very similar. But Pilate is very interesting in many ways. Is that I almost wonder if there was some kind of tingling feeling inside that this guy was different than any other person. That there's something about him. You kind of see in his language, and when he's talking to the Pharisees, when he says, "Would you like me to release the king of the Jews?" And even when Jesus is going to be crucified, and on the little sign they put on his cross, he says, "Let's put Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews," or something similar to that. But then some of the people there are saying, "No, let's say Jesus of Nazareth, who he says he's the King of the Jews." But then Pilate retorted and said, "No, say Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." So it kind of makes me wonder if there was something kind of a little tingle inside him that knew that this guy was who he says he was. Very interesting stuff. So we'll continue on with John chapter 19 next week. Alright, so now let's move on to the good stuff and bad stuff of the week. So some good stuff of the week. This is, when I say good stuff of the week, I mean this is kind of more of a reflection on this show. But The Walking Dead is actually coming to an end, and I'm always been a big fan of Walking Dead. It's a very interesting show. So, but it's coming to an end for season 11, which is coming out next year. So here's kind of a little kind of snippet teaser of what's gonna kind of happen with it. answer video right here. So very interesting stuff right there. So, again, Walking Dead overall is a really good show. So it's pretty interesting to see how they will be ending this show. And of course, they're talking about doing a bunch of spin-offs with some of the characters, and of course we got the movies coming out pretty soon. So that'll be really cool. Alright, now let's move on to the bad stuff of the week. So the bad stuff of the week, once again, the Senate Democrats, being the hacks they are, decided to block the coronavirus stimulus package again. The reason is because, it doesn't have enough in it. And all would it be, it was just it's a stimulus money to the American people, funds for small businesses, and more kind of unemployment benefits. But the Democrats decided, that's not enough. We need funding for stuff like abortion. We need funding for stuff like the post office, the kind of stuff that has nothing to do with COVID or the relief from COVID or whatsoever. It's really disgusting stuff. And now the media is trying to twist it, saying Republicans failed to pass stimulus package. Republicans failed to pass stimulus package. Even some saying that Republicans blocked stimulus package, which is far from true. It was the Senate Democrats that blocked it. And the reasoning behind this is because they want the economy. They don't want the economy to cover because it will help Trump. So they want the economy to collapse, to hurt Trump. So, yeah, seriously, they want the economy to actually collapse in order for their people to win. So if you ever find yourself at a point where you're actually rooting for the economy of the United States to completely collapse, if people lose their jobs or their retirement money, in order so that you don't like to lose the election, you have lost your soul. You have lost your freaking soul. Alrighty, so I'll be back here next week with all of the latest. My name is Sean Clinton, and this is the God and Freedom Show. If you enjoyed this episode of the God and Freedom Show, hit that like button and follow the page to get more content. You can also find me on your favorite podcast listening sites like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Thank you for listening or watching.